Yeah, Billy got the assistant job at Cal.
Billy did.
Yeah, kind of a crazy story. Um, his his wife got the director of ops at Cal. Like I guess they had moved up to Idaho, and
Right.
she was working like I forget with her dad's like company, and just ended up kind of like not liking it. She had coached at Auburn for a couple of years, so she had done college coaching, and she just had started applying, like kind of looking at new spots, and she gets the director of ops at Cal. And so Billy's like, all right, I guess we're moving. And so he goes, and then the Cal head coach, 2 weeks before the season starts, he he leaves for West Valley for a junior college. Crazy. Cal, the program, they hadn't won a conference match in like 2 or 3 years. I think he was on the hot seat, and he just
Yeah.
takes this like kind of cushy JC job. And so all of a sudden, it's a week before double days, and they promote their assistant. They promote the second assistant, and they have an open assistant. And Billy's like, I'm here. And, there's not a lot of people looking for jobs a week before season. And they hire him. And so now he's like, got a Pac-12 job. I mean, it's like a temporary, like they're like, we're just doing this for the season. But it's funny. He's like, I've kind of always dragged him along with coaching. Like he loves playing. Like he likes coaching, but he like loves writing.
Yeah.
And now it's been interesting to see. He's like constantly texting me questions. He's like, "What do you think so far? Like, He's like, I hope they keep me. Like, I really want to stay. I'm loving it. Like, oh, that's cool."
Dude,
Um,
he's got to be the best, most qualified second assistant coach in the country.
yeah, that's what we were all like. But the AD, like, they like totally lowballed them, and they weren't. Yeah, they weren't gonna keep him. I was like, God, these. But I guess the new head coach kind of fought to keep him there. I think, yeah, who knows? But
So I'm
yeah,
surprised they can afford to go on an ops and a second assistant job or second paid second assistant.
in Berkeley.
Uh, is he still playing? Is that, I mean,
Yeah.
is he still winning money on the
So
tour?
he's still like they actually let him like leave a couple weekends, and he did that. Yeah, they're pretty fiscally smart. Like they just like he like reads up on all the like the ways to like make monies off credit card. I don't know, like the different ways you can be
Interesting.
fiscal. Yeah. They've always been like pretty frugal and like smart with their money.
Yeah.
Um, so actually, I think they're making more than they ever have, like having two full-time jobs in the house.
Interesting.
Yeah, they've usually like he's usually just freelancing or playing. Um, but yeah, I think he's loving it. So, but the
Oh,
reason I
good
was
for him.
saying is normally he's always free. It's like, Billy, we got a podcast. I don't have to worry. And now as I'm scheduling, like, Billy, I set up a Travis, like, oh, we got practice. Like, all right, well, I'm just gonna do it. So
Gotcha.
that's why he's not here. But now
Gotcha.
I started recording, so now he's gonna hear all that because he'll edit it. So sorry, Billy. All right. Let me start at 0 o'clock.
What did you say about Billy right before we got on? I'm I'm kidding. I'm
Oh,
kidding.
yeah, yeah. Nothing that I can repeat now. Um, right. I pressed record. I did press record. I was freaking myself out. All right, good. We're excited to welcome back to the show the host of Coaching DNA podcast, the great podcast, Travis Wyckoff. Travis, thanks for coming back to the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
So, wanted to get into the new book you've written, but before, we I was lucky to be on your podcast a couple of times and had the little series going talking about what are you learning. So I thought it'd be fun to just quickly revisit that, and something I always love when I connect with you. You're always asking that, and it pushes me to make sure I am actually always learning. So I guess just wanted to start off just asking you, what are you currently learning?
Yeah, I, I'm pretty much consumed, I would say, over the last 6 to 8 weeks with self-awareness. And so in multiple areas, I'm doing actually a course. And so just a 3-week course, so it forced me to like really, really narrow down, like dive deep, figure out what are, how do you help somebody grow in their self-awareness? So it's a very 30,000 foot view answer, but dude, I have been like completely consumed with how does this happen? How can we as people come alongside people? What are the categories of self-awareness? I know we'll probably talk a little bit about that here in a bit, because I wrote a chapter on it because I think it's that important. So yeah, man, I've just been totally diving into like the self-awareness piece of leadership.
What's the course you're taking?
I'm actually leading I'm
Oh, you're
teaching a
leading it.
course.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, just a Zoom 3-week Zoom course. I actually had the idea because as I'm diving into it, it's like, man, I want to share this with people. And you know, Richard Feynman, what's he say? One of the best ways to learn is to actually teach people.
Hmm.
So, you know, when you have a course, it starts this I'm sure this is will get released later, but it starts in October. And yeah, you want to talk about putting pressure on to make sure you know something. It's put a course out there or speak on it, and that'll drive you really deep really quick. And so I am actually teaching a course on self-awareness, going to walk through just a small group of people via Zoom on some self-awareness stuff.
And I know you'll do sessions and you have your tribe and you'll do different courses. If people do want to, be able to join things like that, where do they look? What do they
Yeah,
join?
I think if you go to my website, Kingdom Coaching, tw.com. That's where I'll have all that stuff where they can just see all the services I have and the things that I do. So what are you learning?
Me? Oh, I'm supposed to be asking you questions. What are you talking
I'll ask you one question. I'm curious
about? No,
what's
you
going
can
on
ask
for
me.
you.
Yeah, I think the thing I've been most, not I think, I've been most curious about and trying to get better grasp on is building the connection between what we do in the weight room and what we do at practice. It feels like for a long time it's been more siloed, and really trying to bring the strength coach, and I think it depends on the person you're working with. I'm very lucky now to have a person who's really interested in understanding our sport. So really trying to like watch film with him, have him understand the dynamics, and have him feel like I'm helping my player or helping the team get kills, helping them serve tougher, pass, not just complete a 4-week periodization program where they're getting better at bench press or squats. So really just trying to line up and find ways to do like functional movements and have load. Like how can we, like, I think a lot of times when you do stuff in the weight room, it's got a lot of load and not very functional. So we're trying to kind of find this middle zone where we can do game like stuff but still have some strength, some power being built. And so there's a lot of experimenting and failure and all that, but it's been fun to try to sort it out.
I love that.
Yeah,
Yeah. Are you into biomechanics? Is that like,
trying to be.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah, I couldn't teach a class on it. Like I'm trying to get better understanding like anatomy
yeah,
and movement, but it's very I'd say that's an area I've probably got a pretty deep fixed mindset where it's like I'm not smart enough, or that's just like you just quickly like tune out. But I'm trying to be more open and trying to better understand, because I think it's, to do this right, you have to really understand how the body moves and how the body works, and understand some anatomy. So I got
totally.
a long way to go.
Yeah. Love
But
that.
more important, we want to get to this book. So I got a copy of it here in my hand. I think sometimes we do video, but leadership greenhouse. And yeah, I thought it'd be fun first to ask you, what was it like? You write it, but then to actually get the physical copy in your hand and to be able to open it, what was that feeling like?
Yeah. I've shared this a couple of times. It really stirred up some insecurities, honestly. You know, there's this level of like, yeah, you have your thoughts, and even, you know, I have a weekly email that I send out, and even sending that out doesn't stir up insecurities. But for whatever reason, all of a sudden putting pen to paper and then, you know, publishing that, and I had a guy reach out to me. He's like, dude, congrats. How's it feel to be a published author? And I'm like, bro, you're aware that anyone can publish a book nowadays, right? It's like not that big a deal. But yeah, just stirred up some insecurities. Like all of a sudden, what if I change my mind about this? Or what if it's not, as you read stuff, and I read it, more times than I can count, it sounded good to me, but what happens all of a sudden if somebody reads it and they're like, what is this dude even talking about? Anyways, there was tons of insecurities. My wife actually mentioned to me, she's like, hey, you should, a buddy of mine, Mike, wrote a really nice review on Amazon. You should get on and read those. I'm like, no shot. She's like, why wouldn't you get on there and read those? And I'm like, I have zero desire to read a negative review about the book. I just, I'm not in a place. I don't want to hear something critical. And I don't know if there are critical reviews. I'm assuming if there aren't, there will be if enough people read it. Anyways, a lot of insecurities stirred up. I'm not sure exactly why. So when I first get the book, there's a little bit of like, kind of like, just move on. Let's go. I've done it. Let's just move on.
And have you moved on to closer, like a feeling of pride yet? Or is it still like, oh man, I don't know if it's good enough.
There probably more of like, oh, wow, great. Like you emailed me and said, hey dude, read it, thanks for writing it. That those are like, okay, yeah, it's not complete, trash. But I still have those moments of like, eesh, gosh, I wonder what people are thinking of it. Yeah. So it's probably a mixed bag.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think it shows you're, one, I think you're humble, and two, you want to be great at what you do. But I think you do have a lot to be proud of. It's an awesome book. I mean, I loved it. It's there's so many really practical, useful things, and I think really on the nose for like what coaches, what leaders experience. Like you hit topics where it's like, oh, that's directly the sort of things I interact with. I had also just read the Oppenheimer biography, American Prometheus. It was like 650 pages and kind of tough to get through. So my next book was The Leadership Greenhouse. So it was just a breath of fresh air. I was like, oh, this is so enjoyable to read. But yeah, no, I think it's awesome. They what?
First off, thanks for the encouragement. I did that. I shrunk it as much as I could on purpose.
Yeah.
Because very few people are like yourself very few coaches especially are gonna read a 600-page book.
Yeah.
By the way, zero shot I can write a 600-page book, so just let that be known. But yeah, I've told multiple coaches that are like, man, I'm not much of a reader. I'm like, dude, you could sit down and read 4 chapters during lunch.
Yep.
I promise you can get through it. So I kept it. I mean, when I first wrote it, I kept cutting and cutting and cutting, partly because I wanted to shrink it, and partly because the editor was like totally obliterated my first copy in a good way. And so, yeah, the size of it is on purpose. Like, no, I want somebody to look at this and not think zero shot am I reading a 600 or even a 300 or 400 page book. Can get it intimidating.
Yeah.
Where this feels like something I think anyone could navigate.
Oh yeah. Was that a challenge? I know I've heard you describe yourself as a verbal processor, like you like to talk and think. And was that a challenge because it is very concise, like you hit the topic, you hit the most important aspects of it, maybe a little story, but there's not a wasted word in there. So was that really challenging? Like, were the first drafts a lot more, I guess, filled out?
Oh yeah, dude. The first lady that edited it completely obliterated the manuscript. I mean, yeah. I can't even describe to you how many markings there were.
Yeah.
Which then forced me to put it down for like 7 or 8 months. Like legit, when I got the first one back, I'm like, I'm out. I am out. Yeah. So yes, it is difficult. It is easier to write a longer book than it is a shorter book.
Yeah, that's interesting to think. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. No, that's awesome to hear about. So then why the title? Why Leadership Greenhouse? And I guess, why is that the title, and what does that mean?
Yeah, I knew this, sometimes I think the idea of culture is kind of a catchphrase for a lot of different things. And I just wanted to make sure, and it's not a culture book necessarily. Well, it's yeah. I kept being around coaches and being around programs, and those ones that stuck out, they're just something kept resonating. They felt right. They sensed right. You'd be around practice, you'd be around their athletes, and something sensed or something was different. And I started having about 3 years ago all these little aha moments, and it's like it's the environment that this coach is creating. It's not the culture. It's not the words written up on the on the weight room. It's not the words on the shirt. It's the environment that they have created that is just conducive for their athletes. And then you think of, what better environment that is created than a greenhouse. You never walk into a greenhouse and see, half of the plants dying, like dispersed amongst all these green and thriving plants. There's like the other half are dying. You just don't see that. You see they're either all dead or they're all thriving because of the elements that are there. And so that's kind of the thought I had, was how much alike it is of a greenhouse. And honestly, like anything, I'm sure I heard leadership greenhouse or greenhouse used in leadership somewhere along the line. It's not like I'm like the originator of that. But it just kept making sense as I was around really healthy programs. You could just sense like there is a different environment, and then which led me then to the greenhouse aspect, or the greenhouse idea or analogy.
It's a great one, and yeah, it applies to all the leadership stuff, but the stuff I'm often interested in, even the skill acquisition side, like I think the same way. When you set up an activity, a game, a drill, where you get all the elements right, like the environmental elements, then the speaking is all done, and the growing all comes from the environment you create versus, someone like top down, like telling you everything to do. So I think it's a nice, even just for like the practice space, like trying to create a greenhouse. So I like that analogy. I think it works well. So you have the intro of the book, and you talk about you were an assistant coach for, was it 11 years, and then you step away and you were a pastor for 5 or 6 years, and then now you've come back to this role of coaching coaches. So I guess just hearing that, I was curious what the, like, being involved in the church, being a pastor, like what's that brought to your role now, and how's that helped you when you work with coaches?
Yeah, I feel like I got a PhD, maybe even a doctorate in the human behavior, the human psyche, working at a church. When I first started at the church that I was working at, it's called Stonegate Church. There was like 100, maybe 150 people going. And when I left, there was 950. So it was a growing church. The lead pastor there's a guy named Rodney Hobbs, total stud. But that you're just constantly dealing with people and all sorts of people. And so really it just, anytime you do something long enough, you start picking up patterns, you start seeing things. A coach, you see a basketball coach who's experienced, and they just make late game strategy decisions just really quickly, or they're just a cut above. And a lot of that, some of that might be they're really smart, but a ton of that is just they've been there before. They've seen patterns. They remember the game 2 years ago when they were at such and such place that they didn't call a timeout. And this time they're going to call a timeout at a critical juncture or whatever. They start to see patterns and figure out patterns, and that's really what happened to me. As you're trying to pastor people and help people navigate the stress and strains and struggles of life on a church staff, you just start to see patterns. And then I start working with coaches. And so all of a sudden, I think one of my gifts, one of the areas that I thrive in the most is in this self-awareness area. So all of a sudden you're working with a coach, and you're able to see patterns. You're able to see like, dude, your wiring really, man, you're going to really thrive in this area. And I also want to encourage you to be careful because of your wiring. Be careful. There's a shadow on the other side of that, a tripwire that might trip you up if that gets overplayed. So just be careful of that. Or, helping, one of the phrases I've kind of started to use is helping people learn their leadership fingerprint. And that's huge. That's so important to know, like, who am I? Like, what sets John Mayer apart? Like, what is it that John Mayer does uniquely and better than maybe anybody? And we don't even need to get into comparison. Maybe you don't even use the phrase better than anybody, but what is your lane? What is your unique leadership fingerprint? To know that is really helpful. So my point being that see, there I am verbally processing.
In a good way. In a good way.
As I was pastoring people, I just started seeing patterns, and then I can easily translate that into into coaching, which once upon a time I was a coach. So that all helps. I think it was Steve Jobs that said you can only connect dots looking back. And so as I look back in my past, it's like, oh yeah, I had to coach, gives me some street cred, gives me experience. I've been in your shoes, John, not a beach volleyball coach, but in general, I've been in your shoes. And then I had to spend 6 years on a church staff so I could get a PhD or doctorate in human behavior and human psyche and the motives of the heart. And now he's brought me back to kind of, combine all those dots to where he's got me in a place that, one, I love to be, and two, I think I can be pretty helpful.
Yeah, that's really cool. And it sounds like, kind of the topic you started with, helping people build self-awareness. It sounds like you've grown your self-awareness through the journey, and that's how you start the book in chapter 1, talking about self-awareness. And you use 2 different examples, which I don't think I had heard it broken down this way, from internal and external. So could you explain what those 2 are?
Yeah, I learned that from Tasha Urich, who's, I guess, a self-awareness expert. Yeah, so the internal would be the strengths, your constraints, some of your wiring, maybe your personality. That would be the internal. The external is essentially, it is, how do people experience you? Are you I would ask you the question, John, are you aware of what it's like to be on the other side of you? Are you aware after a loss what it's like to be on the other side of you? Are you aware after a win what it's like to be on the other side of you? Are you aware of when you had a rough morning what your athletes experience from you when you go to practice? That's important.
Yeah,
it's really important. And so the internal, who am I? What are my wirings? What are my gifts? What are my strengths? What are my leanings? What are my emotions? Like what's going on? And then the external is, how does that impact the people around you?
Yeah. So then how do you get a better understanding? I was thinking of the first 2 ways that came out to me. Like one of the ways you get external self-awareness feedback is through your kids. You're like, oh, that's me right there, in the way they act. But not everyone has kids. And the other one I was thinking was actually the podcast, like being able to hear back, like, oh, you're really dull when you talk, or I don't know, you hear stuff, but not everyone has a podcast. So what are other ways people can be more tuned in, and I guess have a better understanding of how they present themselves?
Yeah, I would just maybe use 2 categories in general. One, I think just trying to create awareness of what you're doing, how you're coming across, like so I'll give this example. About 3 weeks ago, I was on campus. I was meeting with coaches, and I had a one-on-one with a coach. And we were getting done, and I start to stand up, and my phone was turned down, facing down on the armrest of this couch I was sitting on. So as I stand up, I just flip my phone over. Of course, you got to check your phone.
Yeah.
We're kind of ending the meeting, and I saw an email that had just come through a couple minutes before, and it was one of those emails where you're like, oh brother, what is this going to be about? I saw who sent it. Right.
It wasn't for me.
I'm standing up. What's that?
It wasn't for me, right?
No. So I'm standing up, and I look at it, and then I would guess, if you would go back to ask that coach, how did you experience Travis in the last minute and a half of your meeting? He would say, dude, total checked out. You could tell he was a million miles away. He was not present with me. And so I know that's just a small example, but later that evening, just kind of running through my day, that thought came to me of like, oh, that's not good. Like I get it was only a minute and a half, but an awareness. I just knew, like, it was one of those, like, dang, I knew right away. I picked my phone up and I check out. When I say I knew right away, not in the moment, but in reflecting that evening, it's like, oh, dude, I was totally, like, completely checked out. So that's one way. It's just trying to be aware. And
Yeah.
then I think that works in unison with actually bringing people into that journey with you to ask, how do
Mm.
I come across? How do you experience me? Which takes a lot of humility and kind of opens you up to, like, are you sure you want to hear?
Yeah.
But I think the combination of that, I think once you start to get more self-aware, it's you're easier able to reflect and see some blind spots in yourself. But I think you need other people to speak in. You need other people. You need to give other people permission to share. And to your point on family, wives, kids, it's probably a pretty good place to start, because generally they're going to get the worst of us. You know,
Mm.
our AD's probably not getting the worst from
Yeah.
us. They're probably
Yeah.
not experiencing the worst. It's probably our family. So all that to say, I think self, kind of reflection, and then inviting people into that journey.
That's awesome. So it sounds like it feels like the external self-awareness, getting the awareness and getting the feedback. Okay, it's okay, now I can improve and I can maybe make changes. On the internal side, that's more just like use the word wirings. Is that just it's just getting awareness, or is there ways to, or is the idea to try to improve some of these internal, or I guess how do you see the internal side?
Yeah, I think it's all up for improvement.
Mm.
Some things you might not be able to improve. Some things are just kind of hardwired. But
Right.
yeah, I think I'm trying to think, like, for me, one of the self-awareness areas that I've really tapped into is, how do I learn best?
Mm.
And before, you just, it was an unconscious, I had no awareness really what I was even doing, until I kind of go on this little mini journey of, like, okay, when am I at my best? Not just time of day, but how does learning look for me? And it's probably maybe a little unique, but I learn best in sprints. I just do these little sprints, and I read, and I'll go deep, and I'll listen to 10 podcasts, and then at some point I'm going to hit the wall, and I just have to be okay with being done with that particular topic. Chances are I'll pick it up later. So anyways, my point being is, now that I have an awareness of how I learn, I can better manufacture it. I can better be aware of and say, okay, this is the season that I'm going deep. And then when I hit the wall, to not feel any sort of regret or any sort of shame or whatever. It's like, all right, I'm done. I'm moving on. I'm not scattered. It's
Mm.
okay to be scattered, and it's just the way I learn. So, and I'm trying to be more consistent in how I learn. So I'm not trying to go against my natural wirings or leanings, but I am trying to press that envelope a little bit more. Can I be a little bit more consistent? What does that look like?
Yeah. So you can be, if you have the self-awareness, whether you like the the characteristic, you can be more precise with it. You could figure out how to use that wiring maybe as effectively as possible once you build that understanding. It sounds like. Does
And
that
I
seem right?
think yes, I think there's a level of, like, being comfortable in your own skin is a great thing.
Hmm.
And so
Yeah.
when I see, oh, that's how I learn. I'm not scattered. I'm not it's okay. It's okay to be that way. Doesn't mean I can't maybe try to tweak and improve. But I think the culmination of learning more about yourself, it helps to be comfortable in your own skin. And if you've ever been around somebody that is just next level comfortable in their own skin, they're not trying to self-protect, they're not trying to self-promote, they don't flex, they don't defend, they just kind of are who they are, but they're really healthy in that. Dude,
Hmm.
that's super attractive. I mean, the flip side is somebody who's not comfortable in their own skin, that tries too hard. We could give 20 different examples of what that might look like. That's exhausting. No one wants to be around that guy or gal.
Yeah.
Comfortable in your own skin, everybody's drawn to that person.
Yeah. That's great. Well, I can feel the excitement about this topic, and I imagine this course you're doing is going to be really cool. It seems like we could probably talk about self-awareness for a while, but I want to make sure we cover some other topics. The second chapter you get into this idea of energy. And sometimes I hear like coaches talk, oh, we got to have more energy, or, you know, the word feels kind of like nebulous. Like, what is that? But you use, and I've heard you talk about this before, this idea of catabolic and anabolic energy, which really helps get it to be more specific. So could you take us through kind of what those are and some of the characteristics?
Yeah. So catabolic, anabolic. Catabolic is energy that drains, that destructs, that pulls down, that tears down. Anabolic, and I used to get these confused, so I always say this: A is for awesome. Anabolic is energy that propels, that fills up, that builds up. And so the misnomer oftentimes, or especially in athletics, it's like, hey, you got to be high energy.
Mm-hmm.
And I have friends, I have people that I know that are really, really high energy, and they drain the room. They're just hard to be around.
Yeah.
I also have friends that are high energy that propel and fill up. So it's not a high or low energy thing per se. I use the example of Pete Carroll and Tony Dungy.
Right.
You know, two examples. I don't know either one of them, but through people who have been around them, both really high energy givers. One hair on fire, the other super chill, and they both can propel. Like, you don't have to be like this weird sort of squirrely hyper energy to give energy. In fact, that oftentimes can drain. So it's not a conversation of high or low. To me, it's a conversation of anabolic or catabolic, or do you drain or propel people? And we've all been around the laid back person that you walk away and you're like, I love that. Like, that was awesome. I cannot wait till I can be around them again. Well, what's happened now is there's something that propels you. There's something that fills you up. There's something about their energy that builds you up. Not necessarily high or low for them, but you know, some examples of like people that just ask thoughtful questions. You generally walk away like, I love that guy. I love that guy. That was awesome. People that are you know, that are resourceful. Like, yeah, it's not great, but let's figure a way out. The catabolic side are the victims. You know, nothing's ever good enough. It's those that talk constantly about themselves and talk a lot, and there's never an interaction, ability to ask questions. Those are some examples that just from my experience just drain. They are super draining. And so what I wanted to do is take what we all feel. We can feel it way before we can articulate it. It's been my experience. Like, there are so many times where you walk away and you're not even sure what happened. It either it invigorated you, or B, it drains you. And that's their energy. And so I just wanted to put behaviors to these energies. And by the way, I got it from a book called Energy Leadership, that was really helpful for me. And so not only is it for me, but it's also so you can help other people. We can help other people. So if I come to you and I'm like, hey, John, dude, you just kind of, honestly, you drain the room. That doesn't help you.
Yeah.
Like, you're like, okay, thanks. That's fun. But if I come to you and say, hey, John, you know, when you can get really black and white, like you can be kind of come across as very dogmatic. And so as we're having this live discussion and we're batting things around in discussion, and you come in and like lay the haymaker of this is how it is, and you do see that you can like kind of drain the energy out of the room and just kind of stop the conversation. I want you to work on, you know, you can actually coach somebody up, but if it's just a dude, and by the way, you do drain the room when you do that. But instead of saying, hey, dude, you drain the room, can you stop it? There's some behaviors to it. So.
Yeah, no, it's great. I was thinking, I mean, what's great about a lot of your stuff is you're coaching coaches, which a lot of times we're getting stuff to like, so we can coach players. But I think this one, I guess all of it you said, but I was also thinking that this is an idea I think we think of a lot with our teams, with our players, maybe being able to identify like, what is it about that player that kind of zaps the energy from the room, or people aren't, you know, drawn to him. But to have that language, and then I think some of the ideas you suggested, have those conversations to help bring awareness to that player, I think it'd be really impactful. Not only among, like I said, like among your staff, I think it'd be really helpful, but this seems like one that could really be effective among the team. It's a good
Dude,
example.
can I throw something in? Yeah,
Yeah.
like if I'm thinking of a coach working with a group of athletes, like there is probably nothing more powerful than a coach can do than to maybe approach, and since we're talking energy, we'll stay with this topic, to approach somebody in their team who their micro behaviors add up to like, dude, you just kind of drain the room. And to help them see some behaviors that they do, not just say, hey, you drain the room, but see some behaviors and maybe just make them aware of, these are some things that you've done that I think can really suck the life out of the room. Is there not a better thing to tell somebody who's about to head into adulthood? I mean, if I use this example, this is somewhat gross, but I'm gonna share it. It's the if you and I meet up at a restaurant there in Southern California and we hang out for a couple hours and we're having dinner and we're talking shop, and 2.5 hours in, I go into the restroom and look in the mirror to wash my hands, and all of a sudden I've got a dried up booger on my nose. I'm going to walk back to you and say, dude, are you kidding? Like, how do you not mention that I had a booger on my nose? So I put that into coaches speaking truth into their athletes, specifically in this area of energy. Like when that young lady is 30, instead of draining the room at her company and just killing, just short circuiting her career, she maybe raises her ceiling on what her career would be by you just simply saying, hey, just be aware of this. This can drain the room if you're not careful. And by the way, we all have behaviors that can drain the room. Dude, I think that's a huge thing for not just your team, but for life after sport.
I love the booger analogy. That's great, but it is so much easier just to, complain about it after, like, oh, that person had a booger on their nose, they didn't even notice, or that person drained the energy and not say anything to them. That's the easy way out, and probably the way it happens a lot. So I think that's an analogy we can use.
Hey, and if I went to you back at the table and I said, dude, why didn't you say something? You're like, well, I didn't want to, confrontation's hard for me, and I didn't want to make you upset. And honestly, it's just easier not to. Like it's kind of laughable when we use the burger analogy, but
you should have
really,
felt it there.
what's
Like,
going on.
Yeah, exactly. Yep. Yeah, that's good. I'm gonna use that one. I'm gonna steal that one. Okay, so chapter 7, you go into trust and you talk about the 3 C's, which I've learned from you in the past too. But I think it's a really, really good one. So I'd love to dive into, if you could take us into what the 3 C's are and why they are important for trust building.
Yeah, 3 C's that I have just seen over and over, and they came to me about 3 years ago as I was doing a cohort with some really high level coaches, and one of the coaches was just just like a uber relational. And so I thought, okay, the way you win trust is by connection, because this coach is like uber relational. Well, then I look around the room, the Zoom room, and I'm like, well, these two aren't uber relational, and yet they have tons of trust in their program. So I had to go back to the drawing board. It's not just trust. I think that's part of, or it's not just connection. I do think that's part of it. The other two that I just kept seeing was clarity and competence. So connection is the obvious, just building relationships with your athletes. People trust, when people know that you care about them, they're gonna trust you more often than not. Clarity, when people know where they're going, when people know how they're going to get there, when they have clarity, not just on the big picture of vision and values of their program, it does include that obviously, but even clarity on what what the drill's about and what we're doing this week and how we're supposed to, like, just clarity. People trust those leaders who can help guide them and show them the way, give them clarity to where we're going. And then competence. People, if an athlete looks at a coach and thinks that coach can get me better, there's going to be trust. So those 3 tools, I think we need all 3 of them. I think we need to utilize all 3. I do think we all have an order that our number 1, generally, it just kind of, man, we can roll out of bed and do that pretty well. right?
Mm.
2 and 3 are the ones that are a little bit more difficult. In my experience, the 3 tool is the one that almost always is the reason for trust cracks in our program.
Yeah.
So if you're, let's say yours is, your number 3 is clarity. There's going to be there's probably a good chance that if there's ever been some quote unquote issues or some rubs in your program, it's the fact of like, we're not really sure what Coach Mayer meant or what he was talking about, or we weren't sure if we were supposed to go today or if we were supposed to do it tomorrow because it wasn't clear. That's where those little trust cracks are gonna show up.
So I think it was actually maybe about a year and a half ago, I talked to you about this, and I had a new staff, and that's actually the one we kind of came to. It was clarity. It was like the weakest one for me. And since that, like you suggested the idea of basically just with my staff, like saying my goal, like I really want to be clear, but it's an area that can be difficult for me. So please let me know if there's ever times that I don't bring clarity. And you suggested to do that. And I was like, oh, that's really smart, really obvious. You're like, why did I never think of that? But since then, like I do that with my players all the time, with my staff, with the people around me. And I mean, I should give you a dime every time I say it. I don't, but I do use it a lot. And I feel like it's helped a lot in people feeling comfortable and asking me when I'm not clear, or them even just understanding like that's something I want to be good at. It's important to me, but it's, it's maybe not a strength. So yeah, I've gotten a lot of value from that. So I appreciate your help there. What would you say your use the word lead tool, like your kind of strength of the 3? What's your strength?
Yeah, it'd be connection.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. That is the one area that I've just kind of always been able to, and it's been important to me, just to be able to connect with people.
And then what's your weakest of the 3?
Yeah, it's funny. Like, when I was coaching, competence was the tool that got me into trouble. What was 3, and specifically, I would say like my strength was probably the mental game. My strength was probably helping them to compete, but the constraint was probably the mechanics, the biomechanics. So if a pitcher was struggling and if it was a mechanical nature, man, it was difficult. I was not great at it. So I put that under the area of competence. Now I would say clarity would be my 3rd. Generally, I'm not super clear. I have to really work hard at succinctly saying things and being really clear about it. So yeah, I would say when I was coaching, it was competence. Now I'm really working really hard to be very clear on my communication.
As you were saying that, it made me remember, I've gotten to meet some of your former teammates through the podcast that you've connected me with. And I remember, I forget who it was, but someone was like, yeah, Travis was just a gnarly competitor, like really fiery, like just a clubhouse leader. I was like, man, I know Travis is like curious and thoughtful. And like, I know him in such a different way, but then to picture you like in college or, beyond, just like, it's like, really, that's no way, that's Travis. But it was enlightening for me to learn.
Of that.
All right, so continuing through, I think this is a really delicate balance, and one of the hardest things about coaching, this idea of high challenge while also combining high support. So you do a chapter on that. So yeah, could you take us into that concept and what it means and why it matters?
Yeah, I think this is a human development concept. Like I think about it with my kids as well. Like there's a level of like, so we have 3 kids. One of them's still in the house. The other 2 are out at college. And so I would be it's my daughter, her name's Ellie. I'd be doing Ellie a disservice if I did not quote unquote challenge her. Now, obviously the challenge of a 16-year-old daughter looks different than a 21-year-old collegiate athlete as their coach, but the principle applies that, for example, for my daughter, like we said, hey, this was last spring, you're going to need to get a job this summer. And she was like, okay. And then she kind of, at the end of the day, honestly put out like half an effort maybe to get a job. Well, I called them or I sent them text and they didn't get back to me. There was just that she could have been a little bit more, passionate about getting a job. So it was probably early May, and I'm like, all right, here's the deal. Very big picture. We're going to assume that if you don't get a job, or until you get a job, once school ends, we're just going to assume 9 to 5 would be about the working hours, maybe 9 to 4. So 9 to 4. And by the way, I was not yelling. I was not angry. I just had to set up something that helped motivate her. And I said, we'll just put our phones away from 9 to 4-ish, because we would be assuming that you will be at work. So I just want you to know what's coming down the pike once school's done if you don't have a job. And that it was my way to kind of challenge her to like, hey, you need to get a job, because we're not going to just sit all day on our phone. Or chores. I think it's important that kids do chores to challenge them. And then obviously they need support. So I don't care if it's a student athlete or your kids. I think this principle of high challenge, high support is super, super necessary. And I think how you challenge, how you support is up to kind of your personality and your wiring. I just know both are needed.
Did she get the job?
Oh yeah. My motivation helped. I promise you. She was like, oh, I am not doing that. She actually, I was super proud of her. By the way, this is, I'm glad you asked. She got a job at Jimmy John's, which she hated.
Mm-hmm.
It would put her in an uncomfortable situation. She has to go to this job and meet a boss who she's never known, and go to a job with other people that are probably older than her. Like there was some good, like that was good for her. And then she actually started babysitting. So she has these 2 jobs she's juggling. She was really busy. And I think that will help her for the next 40 years of her life. There was some uncomfortable things she had to do. There was some time, she was working a lot. So all in all, it was really good. And I think that sort of quote unquote challenge is necessary for my daughter to honestly, I want tough kids.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I just like, no, there's some work ethic. There's some, you've had to do some things. This isn't a free ride for you. I want to support you as you're doing it. So
yeah. I like the example too, because I think people think of challenge, especially in coaching, and that means, we're running sprints for punishment, or we're yelling at them, but it seems like the way you framed it is, you were still there, you're supportive, but you just set up an environment where she had to respond, and she had to take on the challenge that you kind of set for her. So I think that's an important piece of it. What do you think of the other, like, is it still effective to have, like, can you still maintain high support and have the high challenge be where it is more on that other side of a coach, getting after it, getting in your face, like, or does that break that support kind of balance?
So I would say this. I would say there are probably some unique personalities that for whatever reason can still do that. I think in general, and I'm just going by your comment of kind of that in your face type that we probably all picture, almost drill sergeant-esque.
Right.
I think those days are primarily gone. I do think there's some unique individuals that can get away with it. And to your point, I think the challenge is not necessarily a verbal, hey, you dumb blank, we better get it right this time. The challenge is like, there is more in you. There's more in you. There's like, and I think we all need that. I think we all need some friction. I just wrote about, like, in order to climb a mountain, there has to be a smooth mountain's impossible to climb, but one that has jagged edges that you can grab. We all need friction and edge to grow. I'm convinced we will not grow to be our very best if there's not some sort of friction / challenge / stress, good stress, that's going to help us be our best. One of the stressors that you have inherently to a coach to be your very best is job security. Like, there is a little, like, okay, do I want to get up and learn? Do I want to go recruit? Do I want to do, well, probably, and some of that's probably some stress that's there. I just think we need a little bit of that, that challenge, that stress, that edge to be our very best. And it doesn't have to be a dog cuss in your face. This is why I think recruiting really, really good athletes and having them compete, because then inherently there's competition. And once competition comes, inherently there's higher challenge, not even from you, just you've created that environment where there's just a high level of challenge.
Yeah, that's great examples. I was thinking of as you get to observe lots of coaches and you get to be involved and kind of get some insights. I was thinking of like the teeter-totter, and this could be off, but if I think of like early traditional coaches, especially in football and 50s, 60s, 70s, like the teeter-totter was way more towards the challenge, and the support side was not getting the equal balance. And now my guess would be it might be a little bit the other way, like as the support swung too far. And it's not fair to generalize, but I guess what's your kind of general, as you're observing, like where are coaches on that balance, on that scale?
Yeah, I definitely think they're trying to figure it out. And I think the biggest question they're having is, how do I challenge at a really, really high level and not hinder mental health, not
Get them to transfer.
get them. Yeah. How do you do that? And so even, and I would probably just say, man, I think both have to be at a really, really high level. How those play out is going to be up to you. So I think, like, I worked with a coach who had a rough year 2 years ago, and he would just flat out say, I got soft. There was less challenge in our program. So he's kind of reinventing, what does challenge look like for me? Like, how do we do this? How do we create some physical challenge, some toughness training? How do I hold them accountable without, quote unquote, pinning them up against the locker, kind of old, how do I do that? So I think if there has been a tilt, I would say that people want to challenge. I think they're just trying to figure out, how do I challenge?
Right. Yeah, and like I think the constraints of I don't want them to transfer if I say the wrong thing. I don't know, even recruiting, it's like all support. You set up this like different, and then you're going to do a 180. And then even I think just relationships have become such a bigger part of coaching. And when you become really close with someone, that can also be difficult to say things that are hard to hear, and things like that. So I have empathy for it, but it's definitely like your friend who said 2 years ago, wasn't able to challenge them, right? Then no one's growing, like you said. So yep. It seems like such an important and delicate balance. And I think a lot of the, like you said, a lot of the examples we have of challenge, or like what we traditionally think of it, of like getting in someone's face, or the ways that we understand doing it, just like that's not going to work anymore. So now it's like, how do we creatively, what are ways that we can create an environment where it's supportive and challenging at the same time? I don't think people are as clear as that on that always.
No doubt. This is where I think, if I loop back into self-awareness, like, this is what's really, really difficult about it. It'd be great if, like, the NCAA could just send out a video, on-demand video, on how to challenge. The problem with that is where everyone's unique. So if you try to challenge, like, Dan Fitzgerald, head baseball coach at University of Kansas, and if Dan tried to challenge, like, Kevin Hambley, Stanford, like, it would go horribly wrong for all of you guys. There would be some good elements to it, but it just would be inauthentic. Right. And so not only is it hard to figure out how do we do that, but then there's no template. There's no, like, and again, you can get some ideas. You can get in a cohort of people and maybe get some ideas, but at the end of the day, it's got to play out authentically. And so, it's just, it's a tough deal.
Yeah, it's a great topic, and hopefully it gets coaches thinking about it. And it's cool that it loops back to self-awareness, because that's how you're going to evaluate if you're, like you said, you're striving for both being at a high level. Maybe not even just like what I was saying, balancing. Let's have both. Let's challenge at a high level and support at a high level.
Yep.
Okay, so I think maybe we cover one more chapter. There's a lot that I'm skipping over, and that's why people can go get the book and read it. But the chapter on inspire, So you give 4 key elements and inspiring leaders. It was really cool to hear, and I think you had told me about this before, how you surveyed over 85 people. So I don't know. I guess first, like, what inspired you to to survey 85 people to figure out what the elements are?
Yes, there was a podcast I was listening to, and they were talking about, I think it was the Bain Institute did this massive study, and one of the topics that they covered was inspiration. So I just kind of went down that rabbit trail. Remember, I learned in sprints, and so I just, like, honestly, there was about a 3-month period where I was just obsessed with inspiring leaders. And it wasn't like I thought, okay, I'm going to go, get 50 to 100 people and get their takes. I would, I meet with either one-on-one coaches or with different groups that I have, and would just ask them, what are the elements, what are the attributes of inspiring? Well, first I'd ask them, who was most inspirational in your life? And then exactly what is it? What were the behaviors? Like, I needed some handlebars. And so probably 85-ish people, just throughout the course of 3 months, as I was talking to them and visiting with them about inspiration. And I just got this long laundry list of things. And then I just started kind of filtering it out, like, okay, you started to see some themes, and those four things that I mentioned were the themes that jumped out. With the big one that really surprised me, and the first couple of times, not one mention, but as I did it more and more, this idea of being a truth teller kept sticking out. It was the one that was like, oh, that's interesting. Like, casting vision for somebody did not surprise me. Like, there is something so powerful to talk about. Man, I think you, like, dude, I see you here. Like, I think you can reach this level. Like, I think you've got it in you. That didn't surprise me. The idea of modeling, that I heard that the most. Like, what was it about the person that inspired you? They were always on time. They were great workers. They were great parents. They were some of the most mundane things that were inspiring. And then the other one that did not surprise me was this idea of building relationships. The one surprised me was this idea of truth telling.
Yeah, it surprised me too, because, and I guess we've been kind of talking about this idea of truth telling, but it feels like truth telling could easily be the opposite of inspiring. It could be demotivating, like having someone put a mirror in front of me and telling me where my weaknesses are. It's like, oh, all right, I guess I don't have it. So obviously there's an effective way to do it, but yeah, I guess, what'd you learn about that truth telling? Like, how do people do it to make it inspiring?
So if we go to, I forget, maybe chapter 6 or 7 on trust, that's huge. It's hard to tell someone truth if you don't have trust. Like, there was a story, one of the stories that came out when I was asking people about this was he's a baseball coach now. He was a junior college player, and his junior college, they were, trying to figure out what's next for me. And he was talking about Division I schools, and his coach just simply said, "You're not a Division I guy. You need to focus on Division II. It's your level. That is where you belong." And he said, dude, he literally shot me square between the eyes. I mean, it just popped me. And as I knew the coach, and so I know, but I asked him, how's that land on you? And he's like, dude, I totally trusted him. He's really, really competent, like really competent. I'd been with him for a year and a half, totally trusted him. So that trust is a key component. That, building relationship, having trust, whether it's clarity or confidence, whatever that looks like, is a crucial thing. But I think when you've won trust, I think you can be really blunt with them. And at times oftentimes it stings right away, but it's like, man, if you're not really truthful with them, you're going to have to, at some point, the truth comes out. And it's like, man, why not? Let's just make a habit of being really, really truthful. One coach that I work with is so freaking truthful. It is like, it's a great environment, because he's just not going to blow smoke. He is so honest with his athletes, and you can feel it, like, in a good way. They don't like it all the time, but they just trust.
Yeah. I think the emphasis that you put that probably, he probably can't do that in his first meeting with them. Like
For sure.
if you haven't built the trust or have the relationship, then that's going to be, yeah, debilitating. But if it's like, I know this person believes in me, I know this person cares for me, I know I trust this person, then I could see how that could go from, yeah, crushing you to being like, oh, I'm gonna like, okay, I get it. I'm gonna go change. I'm gonna get better.
Totally.
Yeah. Cool. Well, we covered a lot of it, but there's still a lot more to get into. So I hope people can enjoy and go get the book. I know it's on Amazon. That's where I got it. The Leadership Greenhouse. I was already thinking as we're talking, just how I was going to use a couple more and apply a couple of these concepts. I put it down. I'm going to make sure I bring it into work today. I was going to talk it over with my staff. So it's great. It's awesome and you've got me thinking and wanting to figure out how to implement a lot of these ideas. So congrats again on the book. I think you have a lot to be proud of.
Yeah, dude, thanks. Hey, by the way, I don't know if you probably maybe figured this out, maybe you didn't. I used a lot of what would you call it, like aliases for names.
Yeah.
The last chapter, not last because it was last, but last because I think it
Feedback.
Yeah, feedback was honestly the primary model for feedback was you, just in how you run your program and the influence that you win with your athletes through feedback. Yeah, so just to give you credit, that chapter was written by me learning from you.
Oh, well, that's awesome. I'm glad I could have a small contribution. It means a lot.
For sure.
But yeah, appreciate it. And I know I always love how you and your podcasts, and people who don't listen to podcasts, go check it out. Coaching DNA. It's awesome. You always end asking guests about, you have your 3 questions, but I want to hit on one of them, I guess books you've been reading or podcasts you've been listening to that maybe we should check out.
Yeah, I'm gonna pull up so I get the name of it. I've been reading a book called Leadership Reckoning.
Mm-hmm.
It's probably outside a little bit of what kind of my normal reading would be. It's essentially, it's about how all universities have this like slogan of developing tomorrow's leaders. Like almost every university has something on their website about that. And these 2 guys did like this deep dive and have found out that actually the leadership training at university is woefully low. And so I was kind of been diving into that. And the other book that I just got done reading that I'm taking some different executive staffs through is called Crucial Conversations. Phenomenal book. And I think it is one of those areas that people struggle, and that is to have harder, crucial conversations. And a lot of the struggle, some of the struggle is internal. Some of it's like heart level, like fear of man, don't want to disappoint, don't want to, like, some of it is internal. Some of it's a skill thing. Like, I'm not even sure how to adequately and healthily have this conversation. So Crucial Conversations is one that I just got done reading and am working through with some executive teams. So yeah, those are the 2 that I've kind of most recently been on.
Lots of good stuff. Now, hopefully we gave some people some homework, some things to learn.
For sure.
Always great to connect. This was something I was really looking forward to, and congrats again on the book, and thanks for spending the time with us again.
Yeah, dude, thanks for having me. I appreciate it. Well, hey, we'll have to do it. What are you learning? Recording soon.
Let's do it. I'm in.
Love it.
I'll stop.